Have you ever listened to a piece of music and felt that sudden rush of excitement when a surprising chord appears? That's the power of secondary dominants. In this video, I'm revealing how they can transform your music and elevate your compositions. So grab your instrument and let's unlock these secrets together. Let's go! Our system of harmony is called functional harmony because we consider chords to have three types of functions: tonic, subdominant and dominant. The tonic sounds like home, it's the place that's most resolved, and the dominant sounds like it really wants to go home. And the subdominant is neither. It's not really home, but it doesn't really pull us towards home either. Right now we're interested in the dominant-tonic relationship. So G7 would be the tonic to a C chord, whether that's C major or C minor, that doesn't matter. G7 contains the leading tone B to C. But G7 also contains a tritone between B and F. Tritone just means three tones, as in a distance of three whole tones, and it's a very dissonant sound that adds to the need to resolve. And the major third wants to resolve up, it's the leading tone, and the minor seventh wants to resolve down, so the tritone gets pulled apart to land in the tonic. So that's our dominant bringing us back home. But each chord in the key can have its own temporary dominant, pretending that that chord is a temporary tonic. These are secondary dominants, and we noted their harmonic analysis, the Roman numeral stuff, as a Roman 5 between parentheses. The most common type of secondary dominant has to be the one leading to the dominant. So in the key of C, the dominant is G7. And what would be the secondary dominant leading to G7? Well, the easiest way to calculate this is to take the target chord and then take the fifth of the target chord. So a C, if we're going there, the fifth is G, which is why G7 leads to C. So this is a quick calculation. Now we're moving to a G chord. G is now the target chord. So what's the fifth of G? It's D. D7 would lead to G, leading us back to C. However, in Beautiful Mess by Jason Mraz, there's a part where he goes D, and then F, G, D. Okay, I'm now playing in the key of C to keep the explanation simple. The original is in a different key, but whatever. So how are we going to explain this? Like, where is this D coming from if we're going to F? Well, the thing is, just because we're playing a secondary dominant that wants to resolve to a certain place doesn't mean we have to resolve there. So when you're playing in the key of C and suddenly there's a D chord, or even better yet a D7th, all we're saying is this sounds like it wants to go to G, but it doesn't mean you have to go to G. You can go to a different chord as well. And to be clear, the Roman numeral analysis, the harmonic analysis of such a chord would be the 5 between parentheses to indicate a secondary dominant, but when it doesn't resolve the way you would expect, you have to specify where it does want to go, slash the chord where it wants to go to. Okay, let's apply it in another way. Let's take the secondary dominant leading to a D chord. So what's the fifth of D? Calculate it for yourself. It's A. A7th will lead to D. But in the key of C, the second chord is D minor, and A7 would lead to D minor as well. Now let's take a turnaround, so that's 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, a very typical chord progression, and let's replace the sixth, A minor 7, with an A7, a secondary dominant leading back to D. So that would sound something like this. So now it's the tonic, and then the secondary dominant to the 2 chord, which has subdominant function, and then the dominant leading back to the tonic. You can create secondary dominants for any of the chords in the key, except for the half diminished chord. In minor that's the 2 chord, in major that's the 7 chord, but either way, don't play a secondary dominant leading to half diminished, because half diminished is even more dissonant than the dominant chord. And if you're creating tension that wants to resolve, and then you're resolving to more tension, that doesn't work, that doesn't feel right. Now let's take the same 1, 6, 2, 5 chord progression and place a secondary dominant before each chord. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so that sounds just fine, but you might be able to tell that we're moving in fifths a lot. So I could just play C major 7, A7, D7, G7, C major 7 to land on a tonic. And then what are we doing exactly? Like this is a secondary dominant, A7, leading to D. But we're not going to the D minor chord that's in the key. We are going to D7, another secondary dominant that goes to G7, D dominant, going to the tonic. Okay, you can expand this concept infinitely, or well, at least up to 12 chords, because then you've been around the entire circle of fifths, to create a dominant chain. This is also something you can do. It doesn't happen that often in songs, but it's another tool you can use and that you can apply in your own songs and compositions. Another thing to realize is that secondary dominants are already using notes that are outside of the key we're in. Like in the key of C, we would have D minor 7th containing the note F, but D 7th contains the note F sharp, which is taken from outside of the key. Okay, now let's say we want an added note on a secondary dominant leading to D minor, so that's A7. We could add the flat 13. Now that's an altered chord, right? That's a pretty weird and dissonant sound, except in the context, it's gonna make it sound more supple, more easy listening, smooth, you know? Why? Because the flat 13 is an F. It helps us stay within the key. Adding a 13, not the minor 13, but the actual 13, the major 13, that would be quite jarring. That would take an F sharp and take us from outside of the key. So let's see what this A7 flat 13 sounds like in context. It's not that weird, right? It would be stranger to play the major 13. I'm not saying it will be wrong, I'm saying it will be stranger. Now, the lesson I'm trying to get across here is that these altered, added notes can help us stay closer to the original key we're in. Okay, let's take a look at how these things are applied in actual pop songs. Like, for example, each morning I wake up and I die a little, can barely stand on my feet. Okay, that's the first part of Somebody to Love by Queen, but what's happening there harmonically? It's a G chord, D over F sharp, E minor. Nothing strange going on so far. Can barely stand in A7 on my feet to D. What's the fifth of D? It's A, we've seen this a couple times already. A7 is a secondary dominant leading to the dominant of the key we're in. We're in the key of G. So this is one song where it's used. It gets used a bunch of times. Take a look in the mirror and cry, Lord, what you do to me? Na, 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 na. I just can't get no relief, Lord. Find me somebody to love. Let's also look at How Deep Is Your Love. We've looked at this song before in other lessons, pop-up will be somewhere, but there's a secondary dominant in there as well. So let's take a look. I see your eyes in the morning sun. I feel you touch me in the morning rain. Okay, so I made it obvious, hopefully. The fifth of F is C. C7 linked to F. Or maybe in Creep. I've forgotten what the original key of Creep is. I think it's E, but I'm not sure. I'm a creep, I'm a weirdo. The hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I'm a creep. So what's odd there is we're using the tonic, then a secondary dominant that wants to get us to the sixth chord. But instead of using the sixths, we're going to 4, the 4 chord. Now why does that work? The 4 is a lower median of the 6 chord. So they share a lot of notes, and so the notes want to resolve in certain ways, and now they get to resolve in those ways, except for one note, because the difference between, what is it, C sharp minor and A, there's just one note difference. The G sharp turns into A, and all the other notes stay the same. And now it's time for you to get to work. So first thing you might want to do is figure out the entire dominant chain. So there's 12 of them, just play them all consecutively, notate them as well. Maybe you want to do that first, but afterwards play all of them. For example, I think I started on C. If you're playing a melodic instrument or if you're a singer, try and sing or play the arpeggios of these chords. Okay, so on and on. So another thing you can do to improve your understanding and your fluency with secondary dominants is improvise using the entire dominant chain, using nothing but the arpeggios. So that might sound something like this. And it just goes on forever. Just try and become more fluent at that. And consider subscribing to catch future content. But for now, I'm going to give you a chord progression and you need to analyze where these chords are derived from and what their functions are. So here's the chord progression. Do your thing, we'll get to the answers afterwards. Because I've got one more thing for you guys. It wouldn't be one of my lessons if I didn't give you some ear training as well. So I'm going to play a part of Hakuna Matata. And we're going to ask you to figure out the chords by ear and we're going to get to the answers right after this. But first, listen to what I'm playing and figure out what it is. So first a chord to give you a tonic. Hakuna Matata. Try and figure out the chords. It's not exactly like the original. So try and listen to what I played and try and figure out what that was. So good luck and we'll get to the answers. I kind of forgot to record the answers to the chord progression, so that's why we have this shot right now. It's whatever, it's gonna work. So B flat and B flat major 7 indicates we're in the key of B flat, and we started on B flat as well, so we're in the key of B flat. B flat 7 is the secondary dominant leading us to E flat. And D7 is odd as well, but it's followed by G minor, and the fifth of G is D. So D7 is a secondary dominant of G as well. G minor with the descending bass line, descending into the secondary dominant for F, the secondary dominant for the dominant. So F7 is the 5 chord, it's the dominant, going back to B flat, which is the tonic, the 1. And that's all the chords. Okay, so I gave you a tonic up front because the song doesn't start on the tonic. Hakuna Matata. It's this a 4 chord in the key of C, that's F. So let's just play in the key of C for now. F. What a wonderful phrase, back to 1, which becomes a dominant chord. Now C is the 5th of F. So this would be a secondary dominant that wants to resolve back to F. Hakuna Matata, and it goes there, F. Ain't no passing craze, and this is a D7th. You could hear na na na, this is the 1 but we're on the, so that's D, and this is a 7th chord, na 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 na, so that's the arpeggio of the 7th chord. It's D7th wanting to resolve back to G. Here we play the G, A minor, B flat diminished. I revealed this chord because it's just too hard to figure out right now with the knowledge we have so far. Leading to G over B, leading to E7th slash G sharp or over G sharps. But let's get into that movement for a second. What it really was is G and then moving over G. Moving from G to G over B, right? So it's movement, but functionally we're staying in this dominant position, in the G position. So that's the 5th, it's the dominant. Leading to a secondary dominant, E7th. The 3rd in the bass makes it harder to figure out, but the ba 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 da 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 da. So that's the entire arpeggio, and da, da, the bass note is the third. Da, and of course, E7th, E is the fifth of A. E7th wants to go to A minor. It means no worries. C over E, F, D7 over F sharp. So it's almost an excuse to get us to move to the secondary dominant that wants to go to the dominant with the third in the bass. You know, just moving to this weird note, and the movement there just stays within the key to surprise us with the secondary dominant. It's a Now you would think we would go to G, but we don't. We're going to C over G. We're going to talk about this chord later on, and we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm going to get into it a bit more in a later lesson. But right now, it's just C over G, leading to G, leading back to C. For some kind of reason, I kept playing, and we got C, C over E, F, G. It's actually F over G, making a G9 sus4. We've talked about this before, and the noise will be in screen. And you play that twice, and then we get this magic little build-up section, this bridging section. Secondary dominant, again leading to A minor, worries, and repeat. It's a problem-free philosophy. Hakuna Matata. That's everything. The last thing you need to do is use these things in your compositions. I've already talked about how you can use them in improvisations, but also use them in compositions. And remember, you need to make something you enjoy, not something you need to do because I told you so. No, something you actually enjoy making. Now, if you're playing, I don't know, in the key of C and you want to replace an A minor 7th with an A 7th, does it sound better to you to do so? If it doesn't, don't do it. Go look for a situation where it actually sounds better or more interesting for you to use that chord, so you can get used to what that feels like. Because again, we want to move from understanding to hearing to feeling. And you need to feel this stuff. So use it in compositions in order to sink that knowledge in deeper. And that brings us to the recap. Now, we talked about secondary dominants and how they want to move towards a temporary tonic, and they can move to any of the chords in the major scale or in the key. I mean, it works for a minor key as well, except for the half diminished chord. It doesn't want to go there because the half diminished chord is more dissonant than the actual dominant that would want to lead us there. Also remember, there's a dominant chain. And remember that just because you're playing a secondary dominant doesn't force you to actually resolve that way. Now, usually people do, but they don't always resolve in the way that the secondary dominant wants to. It allows you to create an expectation and then break that expectation in order to surprise your listener. And that's basically everything for this recap. Next week we'll take a look at what you're supposed to play over a secondary dominant chord. I mean, we're already taking notes from outside of the key, so I can't just play C major over an A 7th chord. Well, I mean, you can, but it's not the typical answer for what you might want to play there. So next week we're going to get into it. For now, just go make some music.